Welcome to Team Futurism. Today I'm interviewing Katie Herzog, who is co-host of the podcast Blocked and Reported and is author of the new book, Drink Your Way Sober, the science-based method to break free from alcohol. And I have a copy right here. Katie, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's always interesting to hear people read the name of the book because it's like deceptively hard to say. Everybody has a little list, the science-based. I do the same thing every time.
That's funny. I actually remember you having that same list on it
Yeah.
when you were in one of them.
I should have said it aloud before I named it. I didn't, as you can tell.
Although, you know, people are supposed to just read it, not even say it. So I guess there's maybe that. But yeah, so I, over the weekend, was having some drinks with a friend of mine, as one does. And the subject of your book got brought up. And I found it very hilarious to me that the buddy I was with, he knew exactly who you were, but only because of your appearance on the Chris Williamson show. And because you were on there promoting your book.
Right.
And he told me that he listened to about half an hour of it and he had no idea what you were supposed to do to get over alcoholism. And this is a guy who could maybe benefit from like the wisdom of your book, right? And so that kind of prompts me to want to jump right in for all the Chris Williamson listeners out there.
Yeah.
who made it halfway in and don't know what the answer is. So Katie, how do you break free from alcohol?
So I can tell you what I did. There are many different paths out of problem drinking, but what I did is a very specific protocol called the Sinclair method. And it's based on a medication. That medication is called Naltrexone, and it's an opioid blocker or an opioid antagonist. There are other opioid blockers that do the same thing, but the one that I did was called Naltrexone, and it works. The Sinclair method works like this: so you take an opioid blocker, and then you wait an hour, which is how long it takes to metabolize into your system, and then you drink as usual, but you do it with this opioid blocker in your system, and the opioid blocker, it blocks the pleasurable effects from alcohol. So alcohol doesn't affect everybody the same way, but when I drink, I get an endorphin dump from alcohol. It's a high experience. It's an energized experience. Not everybody has that, but for people who do, naltrexone dulls that. So when I drink alcohol on naltrexone, it makes me kind of sleepy. It's a much more of a sedating effect. I feel a little depressed. Like I get the sort of the physical effects of drinking. Like I can get drunk, but I don't get high. I don't get buzzed from it, if that makes any sense. And if you do this repeatedly over time, ideally you reach a state of extinction or pharmacological extinction, which is a psychological term that basically means unlearning a behavior. So I did this for 7 months, taking naltrexone every time that I drank, and I lost the desire for alcohol. I have no desire for it. I'm completely indifferent to drinking. Some people use this method to just drink less. So they want to drink one glass of wine and not the whole bottle. And it can be effective of that, just as sort of a moderation tool. But for me, I wanted sort of freedom from what had become a fairly debilitating alcohol addiction. And so I used it to quite literally drink my way sober. That's the title of the book.
I do see this as a technology story. Because if you go back, you actually quote in the intro of your book, maybe I can read it. You have this quote from Alcoholics Anonymous. They say, physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. I've heard you say that you don't just consider yourself in recovery, you consider yourself recovered. And it's because of this drug. So like effective science, there are caveats to this, and maybe we can get into a little bit, but like effectively there is a drug that can be a cure. Do people agree with that? Or is that more of a personal take for you that you are like not in recovery, but like recovered?
It depends. I don't know that I've ever heard someone else use that sort of exact phrasing. But it kind of depends who you talk to. I don't think there are many clinicians who would probably use the term cured. Like it sounds a little quacky. And I think physicians tend to probably be a little bit more conservative when it comes to making claims like that. Same with researchers, at least legitimate researchers, which I completely understand. But I'm of course neither a researcher nor a clinician, so I can use the language that I want. It is controversial. My book was just reviewed in the Spectator, the American version of the UK publication. Terrible review. It was written by someone who is a lifelong AA devotee, and she seemed extremely skeptical that a cure would be possible. But that those words that you just read, those were written in the 1930s. This was at a time when we're talking almost 100 years ago. Technology has changed. What we know about drinking has changed since then. And I think the founders of AA, Bill Wilson in particular, were he was extremely open-minded. He was in the 1950s. He was doing LSD with Timothy Leary. I think he would embrace something like naltrexone, whether he considered it a cure or not.
It is still a very much unknown drug, which makes your book important and relevant. This is a common thing with drugs, which is kind of crazy. I mean, penicillin had a similar story where it was like shelved for a long time, and lithium for bipolar, kind of the same thing. Like it was there, but like no one knew about it and just like shelved. What's the deal with naltrexone effectively still being kind of sort of shelved? And interestingly, my wife actually works as a therapist in an inpatient care facility, and she has clients who are like either coming in off the streets or like going to jail for 30 years or coming out of jail for 30 years. Like it's like intense stuff. And she tells me that her office facility, whatever they would call it, clinic, I'm not sure, they're like very pro drug use, like any sort of like science-based drug type things to get people off of medication. But I imagine that is maybe a particular thing to her clinic. And so she was like all about this, right? Probably if you go to a lot of other places, and this is just like, I see this online, like researching the drug, kind of sort of nobody knows about it still. And like, why is that?
So it's interesting. So naltrexone was first synthesized in 1963. So this is not a new drug whatsoever. It's been FDA approved to treat opioid addiction since the 1980s, FDA approved to treat alcohol addiction since the 1990s. Last year was the 30th anniversary of this drug being FDA approved. So it's not new at all. And it is increasingly seen as a first-line treatment among specialists. So if you go to a specific clinic like your wife's, where they are, specializing in addiction, you're much more likely to get prescribed a drug like naltrexone or the other FDA approved or off-label drugs used to treat alcohol use disorder. The population that is less knowledgeable about this are frontline physicians like GPs, general practitioners, and ER doctors. And I think a big part of that comes from medical education in the United States. So until the opioid crisis, most clinicians, most doctors who went to med school and then residency, so 8 years of training in the US, would have gotten very minimal education on addiction at all, alcohol or drugs. So alcohol kills 178,000 Americans every year. The cost to the criminal justice system, to the healthcare system, is immense. There's probably no one substance that is more costly to the public than alcohol. Maybe tobacco.
Maybe Twinkies too.
Yes. Maybe carbs.
Sugar.
Although people aren't usually like murdering each other over sugar highs, which it does happen. Half of murders, alcohol is an element in half of murders.
Is it really? That's crazy.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a really and not that, look, I had a long career as a drinker. I know the good sides as well. I'm not like pushing teetotalism for everybody. There are some real benefits to drinking. And I think the fact that younger people are drinking less, I think there are some downsides to that as well, socially. But medical education has not adequately prepared doctors to take on this challenge. And that is changing because of the opioid crisis. There's been a greater emphasis on medication-assisted treatments, specifically for opioids, things like Suboxone, and then increasingly for alcohol. But we're just like way behind the times when it comes to treating this particular addiction.
It is interesting. The thing about alcohol and the harm it causes society is that everybody has a story of like a family member or like a close friend. I mean, like I have multiple of them. The most traumatic one that I have is my grandpa, who I never met on my dad's side. was a binge drinker, and he would be gone for days at a time, apparently. I mean, he died long before I was born, but like days at a time, he's just gone. And one time he came home with a shotgun to kill his family.
Jesus.
And my uncle had to wrestle the shotgun like out of his arms. And like, I think the story is he like went to prison for a long time and like, I think maybe even died in prison, but like, died when my dad was still young. And there's still like ripples of trauma in my family because of this. And like, it doesn't affect me. To me, it's just like an entertaining story, but like, damn, like I never got to meet my grandpa because of alcohol, like literally, you know? So it is crazy.
You know, there are a million stories like that. I think probably most people in America have some sort of connection, except for Mormons, have some sort of connection with alcohol. Although Mormons also don't drink coffee. So exceptional breed of people. It's you know, it can be fun, but it also has immense cost to society.
Okay, so one thing that is so fascinating to me, and I want to see if you have a take or something. There's this narrative in America that big pharma controls everything, right? Like everything comes down to big pharma, and like I have friends who believe this, and like you turn on Tucker Carlson or any like half the podcast sphere, it's all like that at some level, or like versions of that. Why can't big pharma like promote their own goddamn drug? Why are they having Katie Herzog write a book about it? Because they can't promote their
Well, in this case, the reason is because Naltrexone is generic. So it was
okay. Well, that answers. Okay.
Right. So it was patented until the 90s. The brand name was Rivia, for at least when it came to Naltrexone for alcohol use. But now there's very little profit motive because like nobody is marketing this. No drug companies are sending drug reps to go push this in doctors' offices because they could just be undercut by the next drug manufacturer. Now this is kind of changing. So there's a company that's about 5 years old. It's called Or Health. They were founded during the pandemic, and it's a telehealth company that specializes in naltrexone. And there are different ways of taking naltrexone. I did the Sinclair method, that very targeted use, only taking it in advance of drinking. There are other ways to do it. Some people take it daily. Just some people take it, you know, like before the office holiday party, and you just don't want to embarrass yourself. Like people who don't have kind of daily chronic use problems, but who just every once in a while drink too much and want to prevent that. So lots of ways to take this drug. So Or Health, this telehealth company, I'm not a client of theirs, but I assume you do some sort of intake and then they send you the drug in the mail. They just developed a new product called Clutch, and it's a naltrexone mint. And so the amount of time you have to take it, or what would the word be? I don't know. It has a quicker like reaction time, I guess. So naltrexone in general, you have to take an hour before you drink. The mint, the time is much shorter. And they say that it also generally has fewer side effects. And I think that could be an absolute game changer. They now have a profit motive to get this drug in every overdrinker's pocket or medicine cabinet. And you'll see apparently in New York, there's just ads for this company everywhere. They're advertising on like football. So now there is an incentive, but just selling it as a generic, nobody has the incentive to market it.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so kind of a technology win. Again, I mean, my wife, again, who works in like a rehab facility, she says that this sort of drug isn't actually great for her population because they can't structure their lives, right? They've been sleeping on the street for 10 years. You can't get them to like, 5 o'clock before I start drinking, like an hour before that, like every day, take the thing. They can't do it, right? They're not there. So so like gum or whatever I meant would be great.
Right. I mean, even that though, like the Sinclair method takes compliance. That's the number one barrier, is people stop taking the medication because they miss that high. And I talk to people who work in public health, who work with clients or patients that would probably be similar to your wife's. And one guy that I talked to, he mentioned Vivitrol, which is a longer lasting form of naltrexone. So it's a shot. It lasts for 30 days. Once it's in you for a month. That's really expensive. I mean, insurance covers it. Medicaid typically, I don't know if everybody's plan, I don't know sort of what the coverage is. That he said that could be useful for that population, but the Sinclair method, the people it works best for are people who are highly motivated to change their own behavior, and that's not typically people who are like, you know, living on the streets, who have other comorbid issues.
I want to ask you a little bit about some of the other methods that are out there to kick alcohol, AUD, right? Alcohol use
Mhm.
disorder, is that what it's technically called?
That's like the PC version of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
the PC version of it. So,
Mhm.
like, talk to me about AA a little bit. Like, does it work for religious people? Do you have to be religious? Does it work for anybody? I mean, I hear
Yeah.
mixed things about this, even when I Google it. Like, there's mixed info about it,
Yeah.
I feel like.
AA works for a ton of people.
Mm.
A lot of people are religious or sort of spiritual, and they sort of they enjoy that aspect of the program. Other people are not, and they still get a lot of utility out of it. There are AA meetings for atheists and agnostics. I like those because they tend to be very self-righteous in a way that I enjoy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, AA does work for a lot of people, and there's been various studies demonstrating this. There are critics of AA or skeptics of AA who will say, it works for less than 10% of people. I don't think those studies have been validated. Keith Humphreys from Stanford, he did a Cochrane review of AA. He found, this is in the last few years, his study found that AA was more effective than other behavioral interventions like therapy that includes cognitive behavioral therapy. And Keith told me that he thinks that about half of people who enter into AA are better off a year, 2 years, 3 years later. That doesn't necessarily mean they're sober, but they are better off. They're performing better, at work, at home. Their psychosocial functioning is just higher. So I think, I don't knock AA. I really don't. I think it can be incredibly effective, particularly because it gives addicts a sense of community. And
Mhm.
if you're trying to get over your addiction, oftentimes that means leaving your old community behind. It's hard to hang out in the bar in the early days of sobriety, and if that's where your connections are, that could be a trigger. And so AA gives people that. It gives them structure, support, accountability, a place to go, fellowship. All of that is very important for some people. It just doesn't work for everyone. I went to AA for many years. It just never really worked for me. In part because those things that most people need, I don't need those. I think I'm an outlier when it comes to that, but I just don't. I don't need accountability or support.
Right. When I was in college, there was this drug that everybody knew about. I don't know anybody who took it, but like the thing that like you would take it and it would make it so you would get sick, like violently ill feeling if you drink alcohol or
Yeah.
something like this. And that still exists as a drug. It's still an option. What's up with that? Is there any value to that? Or I mean, to me, that
Yeah.
sounds terrible, but
Yeah, so that's called antabuse or disulfiram, I believe is the generic name for it. It's a really interesting drug. It's also been around forever. It was discovered as sort of a byproduct to rubber manufacturing in Europe. These people like working in these rubber plants found that if they drank alcohol after work, whatever, they get violently ill. And then some scientists like tested it on themselves, found the same thing, and eventually patented this drug. So Antabuse has been FDA approved for the treatment of alcohol use disorder for a really long time. It was the first FDA approved medication for this. It got a really bad rap over the sort of in the beginning of its existence because the dosage was too high, and so you had people who were, for instance, dying when they would
whoa, okay.
take this drug and then drink. So that's a problem. And there were like I wrote about a case in the book where a doctor told this patient's wife, his patient was a terrible alcoholic, and he told this patient's wife, to hide Antabuse in the guy's food. He did it. She did it. He got horribly ill when he drank, went to the hospital. They basically were like, nothing's wrong with you. It's psychosomatic. And then he went home and killed himself. And there was a lawsuit. So Antabuse gets a bad rap for basically the history of the medication, but the guidelines for dosaging went down in recent decades.
Interesting.
And so
Okay.
in recent years, I don't believe there's been any deaths associated with Antabuse. And I know people for whom Antabuse works really well. It's based on
Hmm.
it's aversion therapy, right? So you take the drug and it prevents you from drinking because you know that if you have a whiff of alcohol, you're gonna get very, very sick.
So I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I have just recently started hearing this ad for some sort of a drug, I guess, that makes it so that like you don't experience hangovers or you have like
Mhm.
them way less. I mean, is that like bad? Should people not be promoting that as a thing? Because it seems like it's if there's anything that is a universal experience to scare people off overdoing it with alcohol, it's the morning
Right.
hangover, right?
Right.
Like, so should we be looking into that as
Right.
a thing that we should want to or not?
That's interesting. Like, should there be no consequences to drinking? I can see the downside of that for sure. I mean, if hangovers did not exist, people would probably drink a lot more, which long term is going to be bad for their health. That said, like, I used to drink a lot. If I could if I could have drinking as much as I wanted to and not had a hangover, my life would have been better. I think in the immediate, like, lost productivity, it would have been easier to go to work. I wouldn't have had such issues with maintaining jobs and relationships because hangover, like 50% of my day was spent hungover. So I can kind of see both sides there. Long term, probably not great.
I think about this from kind of like a goofy futurist angle a little bit, because if you think about it, all right, let's say we develop a drug that you experience no hangover. We're also, like, let's just say, on the brink of making it so that, like, we cure all diseases, right? And say like 50 years or whatever. We have driverless cars. Like, we are kind of like slowly padding ourselves into being able to become like massive drunks nonstop, zero consequences.
But people are drinking less than ever. There was a poll that came out. Only about half of Americans drink alcohol now, which is a huge declines over 1960s and 50s and probably 80s and 90s.
I wanted to ask you about this. So there is actually a pretty stark difference between liberals and conservatives and drinking habits. And so apparently 61% of Democrats report drinking alcohol in 2025. Republicans, it was 65% in 2023, and it plummeted to 46% by 2025, 19-point drop.
Wow. But just among Republicans?
Yeah, just Republicans, because of, like, this is like saying a cultural shift of some sort. So like Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, a lot of these dudes who were like very well known in that space were famously against alcohol. And I mean, apparently that had an effect, which seems crazy to me. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know. I mean, Joe Biden also was teetotal. So I guess, but he obviously didn't have the sort of cult following that Donald Trump was. I hope nobody's taking health advice or model. Like, Donald Trump is no model of peak physical fitness.
No.
That's such a massive drop. It's interesting. I wonder if it has something to do with just sort of like the nature of, if you're happier about the way the world is going, maybe you're prone to drinking less, whereas
that's
Democrats right now just like guzzling it down. Everything's fucked up. Everything's terrible.
I can imagine Republicans also not going to college as much. Your old producer, Tracy Woodgrains, he wrote a somewhat well-known article on Substack about how there just like are no educated elite Republicans anymore. They just stopped going to college. And so that could be it.
Yeah. I guess maybe they're all going to New College of Florida, and then not a very big campus there.
Oh, true. Yeah, true. So, but Gen Z, like, they're just kind of like not having much fun anymore. I mean, do you think that this is going to be just like a trend where we have less sex, less alcohol, less drugs, less fun, less friends forever? Or is this pendulum going to switch back? I mean, if you were to ask me, my gut impression is everything's a pendulum. This will switch back. But then at the same time, I see zero evidence of that happening. So I don't know. Do you have a read on this?
My gut is that everything is a pendulum and it will swing back. But I think right now we're entering such a sort of unknown era with AI, and that the potential to be so massively disruptive to the economy that I like the future to me seems like sort of a black hole in the way that it would not have even just a few years ago. A few years ago, I would have said, yes, this is a trend. Things come and go. More people are going to church, less people are going out. Premarital sex is down. This is just like a return to the culture of the 1990s, which I lived through. Things will come around, but now it just, I mean, I'm sure you know more about what's coming than I do, but everything seems, I don't know.
Do you know what Do you know what I actually worry about in this space just generally is I worry about new drugs being developed that are just like incredibly addictive and also destructive. Fentanyl wasn't a thing when I was a kid,
Totally.
I mean, heroin was the worst thing ever. Now heroin was like, oh,
Right.
that's cute.
Right.
You read William Burroughs and you do heroin,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I genuinely
Only
worry
heroin.
about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I worry about that.
I think that's a
And
a very legitimate thing to worry about. And like, I'm sure people who do kratom or kratom, however you say
oh
it.
yeah, I've
It's
heard of
just
that.
it's an opioid that you can buy in gas stations, and it's very addictive. It is
I need to
like
Google this. I actually don't know much about it, to be honest.
it's something it's not something you smoke or inject. It's a drink or I'm not sure how else people take it, but and some people use it to sort of step off of harder opioids, but it in itself can be very addictive. It can destroy people's lives, and you can get it at the fucking 7-Eleven or wherever. Maybe not 7-Eleven, don't sue me. I don't know there, but let's just say generic corner store.
I think that we already are seeing this in our society at some level because, I mean, I live uncomfortably close to a freeway, and so you do see homeless folks quite often. There's not like a big homeless problem in Sacramento necessarily. I used to live in San Francisco, and then we could talk about that. But you live in the Northwest, and there are some cities that have problems with that. And this is another thing that like I don't know if this is like PC to say or whatever, but there's like a zombie effect. You see
Yeah.
like zombies,
Yeah.
that like, and it's because of drugs. And you hear about things that like the combo of fentanyl and meth that's out
Yeah.
there makes it so your brain legit gets fried, so you can't hold jobs and
Yeah.
that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's any coming back from that.
Yeah. Not something I ever want to fuck with. One addiction is enough for me.
Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any thoughts about like rehab and what we should do about people who have massive, let's just say like homelessness / mental health / drug abuse problems? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Not really. What seems to not work is decriminalization. Oregon famously decriminalized drugs and then criminalized them a year later because it actually did have negative effects on the public, which I think is interesting. But it's also environment matters, right? So Portugal decriminalized drugs. I don't know when, a while ago. And so they've been running this natural experiment to see what happens. And I do not believe they have seen this huge spike in overdose deaths the way that they did in Oregon. And I heard Keith Humphreys, he's the Stanford researcher, talk about this on a podcast. And he was saying that there's a couple of things. For one, Portugal, at least at the time, didn't have fentanyl, right? So it would have been heroin that would have sort of been the max, the sort of the hardest drug, the most dangerous drug that you would typically find on the streets. But there's also a cultural impact. So in Portugal, it's a Catholic country. It's the kind of place where people tend to stay in their hometowns. And there's a big difference between being homeless on the street if your grandmother is going to be walking down the street, shooting up outside on a sidewalk if grandma's going to be walking by or your mom's going to be walking by, and then moving, like in the US, we're such a mobile population, moving to San Francisco, moving to Portland, moving to Seattle, someplace where you don't have deep roots, where nobody's going to be looking out for you, and sort of giving into your worst impulses in a place where nobody actually gives a shit about you. It's hard to sort of take one solution or one protocol, something that works somewhere, and drop it into another community and assume that it's going to work.
I think that's a very excellent point. I remember reading that book by Michael Schellenberger, San Francisco, about how to solve the homelessness crisis in San Francisco. And I actually interviewed him about that for Quillette. And I was like very gung-ho about it. And then like at some level, I feel like Michael Schellenberger kind of lost his mind or something, which is like speaks to the fact that I feel like everything is just so political nowadays. Now I don't even know, like, was there like some weird deep-seated political agenda in that I didn't pick up on, because I was just kind of like, I was living in San Francisco and I was kind of like stoked about the idea that here's a solution. I don't know. Like, I feel like everything is just kind of political in this world. I mean, hopefully not, but that's my sense.
Yeah, no, I think you're picking up on something there.
Are we gonna have Donald Trump send in the troops and solve our social problems? Is that gonna be the thing?
I'm surprised that he has not sent the troops to San Francisco yet.
I know. I'm waiting for it. I feel like Portland might be thwarting the whole effort, though, like with how they're kind of just like mocking it. This might
Yeah.
actually be the thing to do, is just to like mock the
Oh,
whole situation.
absolutely. I'm surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised that Portland activists do not seem to be taking the bait. Shocked, actually. But yeah, treat it with ridicule. Don't get violent. Don't fuck shit up. Just treat it with what it deserves, which is ridicule.
This is my take on journalism, is that the best thing that journalists can do is like frame a story because I mean, like, I have no idea what the actual reality is in Portland, but it's framed by journalists in the way that, like, and there are these amazing pictures that come out of this, where it's just like dinosaurs like dancing in front of ICE agents, and like, I don't know, you can't unsee that, and then that is the narrative.
Right.
And so often I worry that narratives get created by I mean, people who go there first, like, and like inject their narrative on top of it or something like this. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, okay, do you remember in not January 6th, but when Trump was elected in 2016, there was the J20, the January 20th riots. Do you remember that in DC?
Vaguely. Sounds
So
familiar.
a bunch of people were arrested. They're fucking probably still in jail because Trump was not going to pardon them. But there was this very famous photo of a trash can on fire. And then if you zoomed out, there were like 20 photographers and journalists taking photos of that trash can. Everybody's looking for the burning trash can because that's the thing that sells.
What do you think is going to happen with journalism now that AI can do journalism? I used to be an editor at FindLaw, Thomson Reuters company, and I was the editor of. We had like 6 to 8 writers for us, and it was kind of like there was like a blog team effectively. So they were like literally pumping out hundreds of articles a week.
Yeah.
There's no way that team still exists. There's just
Right.
no way. And at some level, they were kind of doing important work because they would do like a legal framing on issues that people had real questions about. And sometimes it like touch on cultural things that people Google, and like, here's an answer. And that's just gone, like, from AI, like that. There's no way that still exists. And I feel like we still have journalists who have name recognition. Bari Weiss is never going to go away as a human being able to write something because we just know who she is. Same with like Jesse Singal and Katie Herzog and a couple other people who have name recognition. But if you don't have name recognition and you don't have like 10 years to get name recognition, if you were the editor of a magazine or a newspaper, why would you hire a non-name person to write anything? You know, like, I don't know. I worry about this.
You should worry about it. This is a problem. And I don't, AI, the thing that AI can't do yet is call people. AI can do research, AI can write. Often AI can write better than human beings, but it can't develop sources. It can't do investigative journalism. It can't do that yet. So you're completely right about the structure right now. If Taylor Lorenz used the term brand, and journalists fucking freaked out about this. We're not brands, we're journalists, as though it's this like sanctified profession. Taylor was right. And people who are a brand and who have a direct relationship with their audience are much better poised to survive whatever comes next. I don't know what the answer is for people who are trying to get started right now. Maybe AI will develop some new funding mechanisms or destroy everything, which seems more likely to me. But I do think we're losing something by having journalism go from this sort of working class job where you learn on the job. You don't even, you don't have to go to Columbia Journalism School or NYU to become a journalist. You really don't. It should be something that you can pick up at state schools, at community colleges, and just get an entry-level job, an internship, and work your way up. That's historically what has happened, and that's just all gone. Not because of AI, but because of the collapse of local papers, because of the internet. People are rewarded for being voicey and opinionated. People like me, people are much less rewarded for doing things like going to school board meetings and going to the city council meetings. And that's really a shame, because that's the job of the journalist, in part, or some journalists, should be to ensure good governance, right? That's not what I do. and I'm more rewarded for the fact that I talk about furries and adult baby diaper lovers and internet controversies than I would be if I was actually going to city council meetings. So it's a perverse incentive structure, one that has benefited me, but it isn't good for the republic.
I think about this all the time in terms of just money. I feel like if money weren't an issue, there would be so many more people who were journalists. And this is kind of like my experience. I went to law school and have like never done journal. I know nothing about journalism, but like at some point I write novels and that sort of thing. So I'm a writer. And at one point I was like, I need to write nonfiction because I was an editor and it just made sense to do that pivot. But I was like, I have no experience writing essays. I don't know how to do this, but like, I just started doing it. And I ended up being, I was, one of the first people to interview Andrew Yang just because I said I was a journalist.
Right.
I wasn't a journalist, but you can just say that.
You
There's no credential. It's amazing. I feel like it's a superpower. And I feel like if, I don't know, in some future, if AI does take 50, 70% of the jobs, I think that's maybe still a long way out at some level. But if that were to happen, and if we were to get like a generous UBI, I think that all of a sudden being a journalist would be attractive again if you weren't going to have to like live on a journalist salary. If you could still enjoy a comfortable lifestyle, but then also do the journalism thing and go to the school board meetings and et cetera. I think that it could come back. But
well, the thing is, like, journalism doesn't pay except in prestige, right? And if everybody is a journalist, then you have no prestige. So you have the citizen journalist. Like, there's just a huge difference between sort of the response to somebody who calls himself a citizen journalist and is out on TikTok and doesn't have a degree and doesn't have an association with a legitimate outlet, and somebody working for the New York Times. And I don't mean a huge difference in terms of the quality of work they produce. I'm sure there are some citizen journalists who do great work and some who do, frankly, dog shit work, of course. But in terms of sort of the public response to this, and that is political, right? I think that you would be, I'm generalizing here, but my guess is that you would find that on the right, somebody without the degree, someone who does call themselves a citizen journalist and goes out and streams pride rallies on TikTok is going to be more trusted than somebody who went to Columbia Journalism School and works for the New York Times.
You're right. Yeah, that's so interesting. Okay, so I actually want to ask you about this in terms of the Bari Weiss story. Okay, but I want to like do a high level question about it, which is I read this article. I can't remember if it was the Atlantic or the New York Times, but it was about how, I think it was the Atlantic. David Ellison owns, or is a big owner of CBS, trying to like buy TikTok, trying to like, I forget what other properties, like movie studios also. So one dude who apparently is somewhat conservative or a Trump supporter or something is like buying a massive chunk of the media. And then like Bezos has his interests in buying media. I mean, this is just what you do, I guess, if you're a billionaire. I would absolutely do this if I were a billionaire. Are you worried that let's just say I like Bari Weiss, and let's just say like she has utterly the best intentions for what is she going to become a puppet of a billionaire who's pulling strings on like the universe? Do you worry about this?
I have no idea what's going to happen with Bari. Bari has her own opinions, and I think they are in line with the Ellison families. And a lot of people are worried about this sort of corporate consolidation of media. I'm not that worried about this because it has already happened on a level that local media basically doesn't exist anymore in any sort of robust form. The paper that the Kitsap Sun, the paper in like the kind of the closest city to where I live, is owned by USA Today or Gannett. I can't remember who. They don't do much local news. They do a lot of the sort of just publishing stuff from The Wire. They don't have they do publish. They do have a newsroom, a local newsroom, but they just don't have the resources to be a like super robust daily paper. That's already happened, and that happened a long time ago because of the ad structure. And when people, I understand why people are worried about the Ellison family owning Paramount, CBS, part of TikTok, but the thing is, we don't really need gatekeepers anymore, right? So there's a loss there for sure. Everybody having their own individualized feed. It means that we're all getting a different and sometimes skewed perspective on the world. Like we're living in different realities. There's no more shared reality. And there is a serious loss there that comes with consequences. But on the upside, we don't really need CBS to get shit on the news. In fact, CBS has fewer viewers than the average like Call Your Daddy podcast, right? And call your daddy, call her daddy, whatever it is, that's an independent show. I think they're still independent. The point is, like, I just don't think gatekeepers are as relevant, and I don't think that they have as much of a cultural impact as they would have 20 or 30
Do you worry
years ago.
about gatekeepers still being able to kind of direct the general waves of a narrative? I'm thinking of like X, owned by Elon Musk now, and it just probably because of the user base has shifted, but also the narratives that you see popping up on your feed have kind of like shifted. And interestingly, I will say, like, so many people say that, like, oh, I log onto X and it's just like nonstop Nazis and this and that and the other. My X feed is so like tame and nice
Really?
and like lovely, and I think I just maybe curated.
Okay, do you look at would you look at the For You or the following?
I look at the For You, the one that's supposed to be bad. I do.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I think I don't actually use it much anymore. I mostly like just do like a 5-minute doom scroll. I rarely post, and I mostly just click like on like YIMBY stuff or like somewhat harmless narratives. I do worry that like the second I respond to like a neo-Nazi type of person, it might become all nonstop that.
Yeah.
I don't know how sensitive that dial is, but I mean, in any case, like X has totally changed since Elon bought it, like 100%. I no longer see far left stuff on there, like literally ever, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And that is, I think, a direct result of not just the algorithm, but also, the exodus of basically like the old woke scolds are all on blue sky now. And I do think that has had a cultural impact for the worse, frankly. I'm surprised that I hate X more than I hated Twitter.
You do? Oh, that is so.
I think
that
it's
is
so much
so
worse.
interesting. Do you dabble in Threads?
No, I don't. I'm kind of off social media. Like I look at Instagram because I have all of these hot Mormon mom influencers I like to keep up with. But no, I don't really look at Substack notes. I'm kind of tired of it all. I mean, I still look at X. I sort of have to for my job, but I don't really participate anymore. And that does come with some cost too. I think that I'm less relevant because I'm not constantly posting.
Probably it is all for the best, especially since once you have a lane, you can just like stick in that lane and be that lane. It is very challenging to find an audience. And once you do, they don't leave, which is also like an awesome thing. They know where to find you.
Yeah, if you're lucky, you reach a certain point where you don't need social media. Lindy West left Twitter famously years ago. She doesn't need it anymore. She can write her books or write her articles and people will read them wherever she is. But you got to get to sort of a certain level of notoriety to get to that point.
Great. Well, I will put a link to your book in the show notes. And for anybody who does not watch, Blocked or Reported might be my favorite podcast. I think that people should check it out. You and Jesse have a special thing. So it's
I won't take too much.
Yes. Cool. Well, thanks again, Katie.
Thanks for having me.